So we work by some different definitions that our culture follows. And I talked last week about I built a parallel process for you that looked like the brain and behaviors of a person suffering from active addiction of substance use or behaviors. And I also showed you the same actions or brain behavior with someone suffering from codependency. The intention behind that is to show um, the process of addiction, the process of becoming addicted, as our culture calls it, to something is the same regardless of what the substance or behavior is. It shuts down the same part of our brains as we are all human, but I want to show you that process as simplified as possible because this is the way that my brain needed to understand it in my own personal recovery process. I share often, not frequently, but often my own recovery process in a form of disclosure so that it can offer experience, strength, or hope to others. By no means am I any type of standard for anything. I'm just a fellow traveler in my own process, and sharing my experience, the hope is that it gives you some type of walkout of what it could look like so that you can apply it to your experience. So in looking at those behaviors last week, we looked at things like anxiety, fear, obsessive compulsive, acting out behaviors. And what we noticed is the longer it lasts, the worse it gets. It's an insidious process. And my chase for a substance is parallel and looks very much like my chase for my loved one to make them stop. That is my addiction. Controlling my loved one's process is my addiction as a codependent. That's why frequently there are the synonyms of people pleaser or control addict applied to codependence. What happens for many of us, regardless of the etiology, is I find myself in a relationship of emotional unavailability that requires me to numb and medicate as a consequence of some type of neglect or abuse from childhood. So the reason that we are in a codependent state, the reason we are numbing and medicating, whichever of those words you identify with, is because I don't want to feel pain. It's not because I married a man who's addicted to alcohol. That precedence, that behavior pattern was present before I married an addict. And what happens is numbing and medicating is how I survive that relationship. So whether it's surviving my family of origin and my trauma as a child, or whether it's surviving my adult life while I'm being re-traumatized, I'm still numbing and medicating because we're not built to survive that on a daily basis. I'm not built to watch someone I love deteriorate in front of me. I'm not built to love someone more than they love themselves. That's codependency. And what happens when I'm watching that is this innate desire to control and save them. That's not bad or wrong. I'm addicted to a human because there's someone I love and care about. And we apply that term codependency, and it is, and this is my judgment as a codependent expert, is what I consider myself. A lot of people don't understand that process. A lot of people don't really understand what codependency means and that it's just another form of addiction. And they try to treat it as a behavior. Well, it is a behavior, but it's in a dysfunctional addictive process. So somebody's not going to stop trying to save a loved one just because I tell them to. There has to be stabilization regardless of what the substance or the behavior is, period. So when we talk about trauma triggers, when we talk about I get triggered or my feelings feel bigger than my thoughts, when I say and do things that I don't mean, when I'm acting out in ways that I would never act if I weren't in an addictive process. I really hope, Robin, will you tell me if you guys can't see this and I'll go inside? This is my artwork. Oh, thanks, Robin. If you don't know me, don't pick on me. I'm not an artist. I try real hard though. Don't worry, there's no quiz after this. And thanks to Robin, it's being recorded. So you can watch it as many times as you want. This is what my brain needed to understand in order to understand codependency. So this is supposed to be a profile shot. So it's looking from here, if you can't tell. There's two main parts of the brain that I'm going to talk about. The first one is called the prefrontal cortex, and it's right here, right behind the forehead. The other one is the amygdala or the lizard brain, and it's back here in the back. One thing I want you to know about these two parts of the brain is when one is on, the other off. That's very important. You're not getting quizzed, and that's very important. The reason it's important is because the prefrontal cortex up here, this is in charge of logic, decision-making, and analyzing. Oh, fuck, that sounds pretty important if I'm like adulting for the day, right? Logic, decision-making, and analyzing. What's the amygdala in charge of? When does it get to drive the bus? Well, lizard brain, amygdala lizard brain, is in charge of fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. Hello, stay alive. That's its only job. Keep us alive. So what you're saying to me, Amber, is when my amygdala comes on and I'm in fight, flight, freeze, need logic when we're running from a tiger. That's the state that our brain is in when the amygdala is driving the bus. Well, that sounds pretty important. But before I go further, let me say this. An active addiction, I don't like that word, so I always have to give the caveat of that's what our culture calls it. In active addiction, the prefrontal cortex is off. It is not functional. This is also the part of the brain that doesn't even finish forming until age 23 to 25. Wow. Wow. Decision, logic, analyzing. I have no access to that part of my brain when I'm in active addiction. That's active codependency. That's active substance use. That's active porn, sex, gambling, process addiction you want to look at, food, exercise. Prefrontal cortex, logic, decision, and analyzing doesn't work. And we know that, and we can tell from a, let's say, assessment perspective, because acting out behaviors that someone who wasn't in active addiction wouldn't be doing. The easiest way I can show this is whether it's been your own personal experience or whether you've witnessed it on TV or whatever. Culturally, our culture depicts in active substance use and abuse or addiction that this is where the person that's craving the drug and they're stealing money from their family members or stealing their car to go get it. This is the person that is lying about why they aren't at work or why they can't go to work. This is the person in this state that is, I don't know, stealing from a store because maybe they don't have food or access to food. This is someone who is manipulating a situation so that it's the outcome they need it to be. Did you notice that all of those behaviors can be behaviors of humans, not someone in active addiction? Someone who's stealing food could be a codependent that is a single mom and using her money for drugs, and her kids have no food. Yes, there's lots of layers to that. And what I'm pointing out is the lack of prefrontal cortex. A loved one who is lying to husband or wife's job because they're in a sedative state because they used too much, but says they have the flu. It's codependency. You've heard this in this room many a times. It's doing all the wrong things for the right reasons. There's no logic. There's no accountability. And it gets really scarier the longer it lasts, right? Thinking of my own story, the longer it lasts, the worse it gets. Part of the reason that nursing school got so dicey for me is because I committed my dad. Why am I at 20 committing my father? Like, no blame and fault about that now. I'm just making a statement that even at 20, that's not my job. That's not my role. And my codependency said, if I don't do this, he's not going to live. Fight, flight, freeze, fawn. Is there logic in that? Could he die? For my dad, yes, he could. Does that mean that that's the situation everyone's in? No. Not every substance can cause an overdose or death. Are there other behaviors that can? Yes, because there's no logic in the behavior or the actions. So whether it's codependency, a substance, or a process behavior, that's why surviving a trauma for so long can be so dangerous. Not only do I not have access to my whole brain, but what else has happened in my process of surviving? I can't feel my body anymore. I'm not being navigated by feelings or emotions. I'm always in a fight, flight, freeze, fawn response. And let me pose this for you. Maybe things have calmed down for a few years. Maybe my partner has made it into recovery and things have stabilized. And maybe we have a kid and maybe things get hard and maybe he relapses. Maybe all of my behaviors come flooding back because I'm not in a recovery process. Because if he's good, I'm good. And if he's bad, I'm bad. Even if my codependency is not using, or it doesn't look like it's using, it doesn't mean I'm not surviving. And it also doesn't mean that that part of my brain is not coming on when we get into a conflict, because there's been no repair. There's been no trust built, either one of us, not even me either. So recovery is about me getting back in my body, me recognizing what my boundaries are, what I'm going to put up with and what I'm not going to put up with. And I don't know about you guys, but if I can't feel my body, I'm hypervigilant to everything. And I just want to say, fuck it, all or nothing. Well, that's my pathology. So until I can start stepping into the gray area, I haven't made it to a place of stabilization. And that for many people could take 6 to 8 months of recovery, not 6 to 8 sessions. Why? Because my addiction is to a living, breathing person. And that's not going to happen in a few sessions. I want to highlight how serious and how parallel these processes are, because our culture deems it less important or less severe because I don't have a substance. Well, it's not. And in my opinion, my addiction was worse than his, because he's going after an inanimate object and I'm chasing someone I love and care about. So that's only my judgment. You don't have to agree with that. And I'm numbing and medicating because I can't save him. Do you see that cycle? I'm powerless over that. I don't get to decide whether he stays here or not. I want him to be here, but that's not within my control. And the more my addiction fuels, the more his addiction fuels. So if he's not good, I'm not good. And that's the cycle I have to break. I have to be okay even if he's not okay, or even if she's not okay. I have to be okay, because that's the only time I can start setting some boundaries where I can start bringing some safety to me and or my kids or my furry babies. And when that behavior change starts, that's when it stops enabling other numbing and medicating. Without enabling, pathology cannot exist. It cannot exist. If there's no money, there's no way to buy it. If I'm in a safe place called inpatient, there's no way to get it. Or heaven forbid, I'm behind a cell, there's not a way to get it. There's different levels of safety, and I would prefer someone not be in one of those two places. And sometimes it's a necessity because the stabilization is what's required. And what we do at the HC is we have to get to a place where we know when we're in our prefrontal cortex. Because when lizard brain drives the bus, we're full of shame, full of it. And when I'm full of shame, what do I need? I gotta shove it down. I can't feel all that shame all the time. And I have to start making changes that are good for me. Sometimes that's inclusive of my partner, and sometimes temporarily it's not. But what it always does is create change. Always. So I wanted to show you guys this, not to create more fear, but to create more empowerment. When I feel out of control in my body, if it's hysterical, it's historical. It's a trauma trigger. Even if I don't even know why it's happening, even if my partner isn't in a relapse, it doesn't matter. They don't have to be. Because part of what I'm trying to do is detach and be in my own hula hoop. As long as I hate to say it this way, but I'll speak in the eye. As long as I was ball and chain with my dad, I was never going to be okay, and I was going to go down with him. That is a severe case, and it doesn't always look like that. But in all forms of addiction, trauma, and medicating, there are severe consequences, because the longer it lasts, the worse it gets. I hope this was helpful for you guys, and I hope it was a addition to last week. And I'll share a little. My opinion, as a codependent, I am not only a control addict, I'm a shame addict. Shame is what I know. It doesn't mean it's what I want. It is what's familiar. And it is that process of, as little ones, when we don't have the context of what's happening, either because we weren't told or we were told shit and it was just way too much for our little brains to handle, the only way we know how to regain some type of control is to internalize it, to make it my fault. And so as adult children, if you identify with being an adult child or an ACA, adult child of alcoholics and dysfunctional families, it is when something's happening, I'm bad, I'm wrong, I've done something. And for so many of us, that becomes like an unconscious, it's like breathing. It's so familiar. And as a codependent, I am not bad, wrong, defective. I didn't ask for any of this. I didn't cause any of this, and I can't control it. So being able to look at, I am not the problem. There is a wound that I didn't cause that I'm still trying to take responsibility for healing. And I don't know if that's pissed you off at any point of your recovery, or maybe it's pissing you off today, but I frequently get pissed about that. Not just at my parents, but that needs to be the process. It really helps me. I feel like lately I've been reminded of this a lot because I need it and I'm not practicing it enough. Somebody said, when I know better, I need to do better. That's another like slogan in a 12-step room that I really live by. And I also need to remember that recovery is about feeling. Recovery is about getting to feel joy again. It is not about being able to cope with the shit. I don't know if you guys know this or not, but if you're on this screen, it's because you're masters at coping with shit. What I need to be able to do is feel the joy. And from a holistic perspective, mental body, energetic body, physical body, emotional body, from a holistic perspective, maybe consider, if you align with this, that some of our journey as humans or in our soul journey or whatever speaks to you isn't about becoming my truest and highest self. Maybe it's about taking all the shit off that was put on me and coming back to my truest and highest self. Maybe it's about coming back home. Because it's not fair, nor is it effective in recovery for me to feel like I've done something wrong. Just an opportunity to use a different lens or look at it a different way, as in, you deserve better, and that's what you're doing. You didn't do anything wrong or cause this. Um, as far as tools, I want to tell a story. A lot of people get a kick out of this story, so I tell it a few times a year. Second therapist, I've had a lot of them, FYI. Second therapist I've ever had in grad school. I was walking in, my dad was still here, but it was fucking chaotic as hell. I was probably 21, 22, and I was going into the office at the grad school, and I thought in my head, this bitch tells me to count to 10, I'm going to punch her in the face. Like, I'm going to do, side note, I've never hit anyone in my life. And I felt like I could in that moment because I was so tired of the bullshit. I needed help. I felt crazy. And the reason that none of those techniques worked was because no one ever taught me why to do them. And that is a huge part of why the HC does many of the things that it does. I am not the expert of you. You are the expert of you. I'm just going to share some knowledge. Knowledge is power. Thank you, PBS kids. I'm just going to share some knowledge so you get to apply it to your story, because I don't get to say what you do and don't do. And what I needed from all of those experiences was someone, as a control addict, to teach me the why. That's my language. That's what I get. That's what I understand. So when we are in our amygdala, when our lizard brain is driving the bus, the way that we trigger the prefrontal cortex is by accessing some type of logic, decision making, or analyzing. Think about counting to 10. That requires a different part of our brain than running from a tiger. The reason that grounding coping skills are so simple is because they fucking gotta be. We gotta be able to use them after we run from a tiger. They should be easy. They need to be something a 5-year-old can do, because that's probably the wounded part of me that's hurt. So my favorite one to do, this is only personal. If you haven't tried it, I highly recommend it. It's what do they call it? In the military, they call it box breathing. I'm a Navy brat. And it's count to 4. So hold for 4, exhale for 4, inhale for 4, hold for 4. So they call it box breathing because you do 4-second intervals. And you do that as many rounds as you need to. And what I know about my body is, like any other coping skill, my body goes, oh, she's using that thing. Oh, she's doing that box breathing thing. Much like when somebody starts yelling and my body gets activated, whether it's danger or not, as soon as I start using the same coping skill that I like, it's a muscle. And not only does it activate my prefrontal cortex, but it's also like a light bulb to my body that says, oh, when she uses this, we're okay. It's reconditioning. Doesn't mean you have to use the same one every time. I just work with my clients to utilize that through the stabilization period because it gives some quicker results. They start to notice sensations in their physical body, and then they can notice sensations in their emotional body. So counting to 10 or doing the 5 senses or 5 things you hear, see, smell, taste, feel, any of those grounding techniques will turn your prefrontal cortex back on. I just need the simplest one, and counting to 4 is the best I can do. um, the other thing I want to share is I met with a family this week that's really in crisis and really in pain, and hopefully are about to go into what will create a really effective change. And I said to this family, you know what to do. And he said to me, respectfully, Amber, I don't fucking know what to do. And I said, okay, let's do hand over heart. Let's breathe. He started crying. That wasn't my intention, by the way. People accuse me of that all the time. I'm not trying to make you cry. And recovery is about feeling. He knew exactly what to do. Sometimes it just feels so fucking scary in our body that we need somebody to remind us of that. That's what a recovery community is for. I don't always need to know what the answer is in that moment. I just need to know what to do about it. And what do? I connect. I connect with me and me, or I connect with me and my safe people, or I go to a meeting. Recovery is not done alone. Recovery is done in community. We're wounded in private. We heal in public. So trying to figure out how to do it all by myself, it's not going to work because that's not recovery. Recovery is me being supportable and me allowing my safe people to support me. So when we're in our 4 F's, we're not going to know what to say. We're probably not going to say the things that 2 days later we would think of and be like, damn, I wish I'd have said that. I do that shit all the time. It's my teenage self trying to be sassy. And what I do know is even in my recovery state, I know at my core, at my soul, I'm a very loving person. So recovery, I want to be loving. Whether the other person sees it that way or not, I don't know. That's none of my business. But I want to be proud of how I intentionally respond to something. And if I can't do it in that moment, that's because it's not safe. Maybe I come back later and do it, and maybe I don't. Maybe it's a me and me thing. But when I'm in fight, flight, freeze, fawn, guys, that's because my amygdala is on and I'm not supposed to know what to do in that moment. I'm supposed to just stay alive. So to be able to access that part, I got to love on me first, and then I'll have access to all the tools. I hope this was helpful for you guys. And I hope that regardless of what stage you're in of your recovery, I know I have to go back to the beginning many, many times. I know I bunk my head still 18 years in all the time because I want to do it by myself. I make up that I'm an inconvenience to others, or I'm too much, or I'm this, or I'm that. And what I know is the people around me feel so special when I let them. So I have to remember that too, that as much as I love them, I have to let them love on me too.